The wine glass paused halfway to my lips when I heard my husband's voice carrying across the backyard. He was standing by the grill, beer in hand, surrounded by his college friends who'd driven in for the weekend. The late afternoon sun caught the edges of their laughter, made everything look golden and perfect. "Honestly, guys, I don't even know what Catherine does all day," Blake said, flipping a burger with exaggerated confidence. "Something with HR at some tech startup. Basically, she sits in meetings about feelings and makes sure people don't sue us. It's not like she's building anything real." I stood frozen on the back porch, holding the salad bowl I'd been bringing outside. 20 feet separated us, but his words hit like I was standing right next to him. Several of his friends laughed. One of them, Tyler, I think looked uncomfortable, glanced toward the house as if worried I might hear. Too late for that. "Meanwhile, I'm designing actual infrastructure," Blake continued, warming to his theme. "Bridges, buildings, things that will exist for 100 years. Her job? It'll be automated by AI in 5 years, tops. But she acts like she's so important, bringing home stories about workplace culture and employee engagement, like any of that actually matters." More laughter. Someone made a joke about HR being where careers went to die. Blake grinned, raised his beer in mock toast. To pointless jobs that pay surprisingly well, they clinked bottles. Celebrated my irrelevance. I set the salad bowl down on the porch table very carefully. My hands were perfectly steady, which surprised me. I'd expected them to shake, expected some physical manifestation of the rage, and hurt churning in my chest. But my hands were calm, professional. The same hands that had signed 100-page contracts, negotiated 7-figure severance packages, rebuilt entire HR departments from scratch. The same hands that, 3 months ago, had discovered Blake's LinkedIn messages to recruiters at my own company. Messages where he'd asked them to put in a good word and help a spouse out because my wife works there, but she's not really connected to the actual hiring managers. My own company, TechCore Solutions, where I was VP of Human Resources and had final say over every director-level hire and above. Where I'd spent 6 years building systems, culture, and processes that had taken us from 50 employees to 500, where recruiters reported to my department, where hiring managers consulted me on every significant decision. Blake had been trying to get a job at my company, behind my back, while telling his friends my work was pointless. I picked up the salad bowl again and walked down the porch steps with measured grace, painted on a smile. Approached the group of men who were now watching me with varying degrees of awareness that I'd probably overheard something. "Salad's ready," I said brightly. "Blake, honey, the burgers look perfect." "You're such a great cook." He relaxed visibly, clearly thinking I'd missed his little speech. "Thanks, babe. Another few minutes and we'll be ready to eat." "Wonderful. I'll just set everything up on the table." I turned to his friends with that same pleasant smile. "Tyler, how's the new baby? And Marcus, I heard you got that promotion. Congratulations." We made small talk. Normal, civilized, suburban barbecue small talk. I asked about their jobs, their lives, their families. Laughed at jokes. Played the perfect hostess while my husband stood 3 feet away, completely unaware that I'd heard every word. Completely unaware that his job application to TechCore, the one he'd submitted 2 weeks ago using the internal referral link he'd somehow obtained, was currently sitting in a folder on my laptop marked under review. That's what the status would say indefinitely. Not rejected, because that would raise questions. Not accepted, obviously. Just under review. Perpetually. A job application in purgatory, neither alive nor dead. But that was just the beginning. That was the appetizer to a much more elaborate meal I'd been preparing for 3 months. Catherine? Blake's voice pulled me from my thoughts. You okay? You seem distracted. I'm perfect, I said, meeting his eyes. Just thinking about work stuff. You know how it is, well, actually, you probably don't. Since my job is so pointless and all, his face went white. Tyler coughed suddenly, found something fascinating about his shoes. The other friends exchanged glances. You heard that, Blake said. Not a question. I did. But don't worry about it. I'm sure you didn't mean anything by it. Just guys talking, right? I patted his arm, let my hand linger there for just a moment. I'll go get the potato salad. You keep cooking those burgers. That's your real talent, after all. I walked back into the house before he could respond, before any of them could see the smile fall from my face. Let the screen door close behind me with a soft click that sounded like a cell door locking. In the kitchen, I leaned against the counter and took 3 slow, deep breaths. The calm I'd maintained outside was genuine, but it was also carefully constructed. Beneath it was a fury so cold and focused it felt like ice in my veins. 3 months. I'd known for 3 months that Blake was unhappy in his job, that he resented my success, that he'd been quietly sabotaging me in small ways, forgetting to mention my promotions to his family, downplaying my achievements when friends asked, making subtle comments about how I was never home even though he worked just as many hours. I'd known, and I'd been planning, methodically, carefully. The way I did everything in my professional life with attention to detail and long-term strategy. Blake thought my job was pointless. He was about to learn exactly how much power a pointless HRVP actually wielded. My phone buzzed. A text from my assistant. Everything ready for Monday's board meeting? I typed back. Absolutely. It's going to be very interesting. Very interesting indeed. Because Monday's board meeting would include a presentation on our new ethics policy, the one that specifically addressed nepotism and hiring conflicts of interest. The one that would require all employees to disclose if family members had applied for positions at the company. The one that would, coincidentally, flag Blake's application and require me to recuse myself from the hiring process, which would lead to questions about how his application had been submitted, which would reveal the LinkedIn messages, which would expose his attempts to circumvent proper channels and use my position for his benefit. While publicly claiming my job was pointless, the irony was almost too perfect. I pulled the potato salad from the refrigerator and headed back outside. Blake's friends were packing up, making excuses about early mornings and long drives. The party was effectively over, killed by the awkward revelation that the host had just humiliated his wife. Blake stood by the grill alone, shoulders tense, clearly unsure whether to apologize or act like nothing happened. I decided to make it easy for him. They're leaving? Yeah. Early start tomorrow, they said. Well, more food for us. I started covering dishes, packing things away with efficient movements. Did you have a good time before I ruined everything by overhearing, Catherine? Because that's what happened, right? I overheard something I wasn't supposed to hear, and now everything's awkward. But honestly, Blake, if you're going to talk about how pointless my job is, maybe don't do it 20 feet from where I'm standing. I didn't mean what? You didn't mean for me to hear it? Or you didn't mean what you said? I finally looked at him directly, let him see that I wasn't crying, wasn't falling apart. Because here's the thing, I don't actually care which one it is. What you said is what you believe. The only difference is, now I know, your job isn't pointless. I was just guys talk, you know? We exaggerate, say things we don't mean. Okay, I picked up a tray of condiments. If that helps you sleep tonight, believe that. Catherine, come on. Don't be like this. Like what? Calm? Reasonable? Sorry if my composed reaction to being humiliated isn't dramatic enough for you, but here's something you should know about HR people, Blake. We're trained to keep our emotions in check, to handle difficult situations professionally, to smile while we're documenting everything you say for the permanent record. His face went pale again. What does that mean? It means I'm going inside to clean up. You can stay out here and think about whether you actually believe what you said or whether you're just sorry you got caught saying it. I walked into the house and didn't look back. Heard him call my name once, but I didn't stop, just kept moving, kept my spine straight and my head high. Because Blake had made a critical error. He'd underestimated me, assumed that because my work dealt with people rather than concrete and steel, it was somehow less substantial, less important, less real. He'd forgotten that people are the foundation of every company, that culture determines success or failure, that someone who understands human behavior and organizational dynamics has more power than someone who just designs structures. He'd forgotten that HR knows everyone's secrets, has access to every file, sits in every important meeting, sees every weakness in the organizational structure. He'd forgotten who he was married to, and that forgetting was going to cost him everything. I loaded the dishwasher methodically, found calm in the familiar routine. Blake came inside eventually, started helping without speaking. We moved around each other like strangers, polite and distant. "I'm sorry," he finally said. "For what I said. It was stupid and mean, and I don't actually think that about your work. Okay, Catherine, please, can we talk about this? Not tonight. I'm tired. Let's just go to bed." But I didn't sleep. Long after Blake's breathing went deep and even, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, planning, calculating, making sure every piece was exactly where it needed to be, because Monday was coming, and Monday would change everything. The last thought I had before finally drifting off. Blake was right about one thing. My job would be automated someday, but not before I'd automated his irrelevance first. Sunday morning arrived, grey and cold, matching my mood perfectly. Blake was already up when I woke, sitting at the kitchen table with his laptop and coffee, probably reviewing blueprints for whatever project currently consumed his attention. He looked up when I entered, his expression cautious. "Morning," he said, testing the waters. "Morning." I poured coffee, added exactly the right amount of cream. Routine actions that required no thought, leaving my mind free to work through the week ahead. About yesterday, Blake, I said I don't want to talk about it. I turned to face him, coffee mug cradled between my palms. "You said what you said. I heard what I heard. We can either move past it or we can't, but rehashing it isn't going to change anything." He studied me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Concern, maybe. Or fear. Good. He should be concerned. "You're being really calm about this," he said finally. "Too calm. What do you want me to do? Scream? Throw things? Create a scene?" I took a sip of coffee, maintained eye contact over the rim of my mug. "I'm 42 years old, Blake. I've been managing workplace conflicts for 20 years. If I lost my composure every time someone said something hurtful, I'd never get through a single day. This is different. I'm your husband, not a co-worker. Is it different? Because from where I'm standing, it feels exactly the same. Someone I trusted said cruel things about me when they thought I couldn't hear. The only difference is I usually get paid to deal with this behavior professionally. With you, I have to deal with it personally too. He flinched. That's not fair. No? What part isn't fair that I overheard, or that I'm not pretending I didn't? We stared at each other across the kitchen. 12 years of marriage reduced to this moment of perfect clarity, where I could see exactly who he was, and he was beginning to suspect I wasn't who he thought I was. I'm going for a run, I said, setting down my coffee. I'll be back in an hour. I changed into running gear and headed out into the cold morning, letting my feet find their rhythm on familiar streets. Running had always been my thinking time, when solutions to complex problems would surface from my subconscious, while my conscious mind focused on breath and pace. This morning, I thought about Blake's application to TechCore, thought about the way he'd tried to use my position without asking me directly, the way he'd assumed the recruiters would help him because of our marriage, not understanding that nepotism policies existed specifically to prevent situations like this. He'd submitted his application through an employee referral link. I'd tracked down the source, a junior engineer named Felix, who Blake had met at some tech meetup. Felix didn't know Blake was my husband. He'd just thought Blake seemed knowledgeable about structural engineering and had shared the referral link, hoping to get the bonus our company paid for successful hires. The application itself was strong. Blake was good at his job. I'd never doubted that. His resume showed steady progression, solid projects, good recommendations. Under normal circumstances, he'd probably get an interview at minimum. But these weren't normal circumstances. Because 3 days after Blake submitted his application, I'd drafted a new policy proposal for the board, a comprehensive revision of our hiring practices that would close several loopholes I'd noticed over the past year. Loopholes that, coincidentally, would impact situations exactly like Blake's. The policy required disclosure of any family relationships with current employees before an application could be processed. It mandated recusal procedures when hiring managers had personal connections to candidates. It established clear consequences for attempting to circumvent standard hiring channels. I'd framed it as a response to concerns raised by our recent rapid growth. Our legal team had loved it. It protected the company from potential lawsuits and discrimination claims. Our CEO had approved it immediately, pleased to have such thorough documentation of our ethical hiring practices. The board would vote on it Monday. It would pass. I'd already secured the necessary support through individual conversations with key members. And once it passed, it would be applied retroactively to all applications currently under review, including Blake's, which would trigger an audit of his application, which would reveal that he'd failed to disclose our marriage, which would raise questions about his judgment and integrity, which would result in automatic rejection and a note in our system that he was ineligible for rehire for 2 years. All perfectly legal, all completely justifiable, all documented with a kind of thoroughness that made it impossible to argue against. My feet pounded the pavement in steady rhythm. Left, right, left, right. The same methodical precision I brought to everything in my life. Blake thought my job was pointless? He had no idea that his entire career trajectory at TechCore had just been decided over coffee and casual conversations. That I'd engineered his rejection without ever having to directly deny him the job. That the system I'd built would do all the work for me, impartial and professional. I circled back home after 45 minutes, stretched in the driveway, and went inside to shower. Blake was still at his laptop, now frowning at something on the screen. "Everything okay?" I asked, toweling my hair. "Yeah, just work stuff. The Riverside project is behind schedule and the client's getting anxious. I'm sure you'll figure it out. You're good at what you do." He looked up, surprised by the compliment. "Thanks. That means a lot, actually, especially after yesterday." "I meant what I said, Blake." "I know you're a good engineer. I've never doubted your professional competence." I paused in the doorway. "I just wish you extended me the same courtesy." Before he could respond, I headed upstairs. Let him sit with that. Let him wonder exactly how much damage he'd done, exactly what consequences might be coming. The afternoon passed quietly. I spent several hours working on my laptop, finalizing the presentation for Monday's board meeting. Blake watched a game, did laundry, made dinner. We moved around each other like careful dancers, maintaining distance, avoiding collision. That evening, my phone rang. My assistant, Caroline, calling outside work hours unusual enough to make me step into my office for privacy. "Sorry to bother you on Sunday," she said. "But I thought you should know Blake Thompson submitted his time card wrong for the consulting work he did last month. The one where he advised on our server room construction. I'd forgotten about that." 3 months ago, TechCore had hired Blake's firm for a small project, reviewing our plans for a new server room, making sure the structural elements met code. He'd worked maybe 20 hours total, charged his standard consulting rate. Legitimate work, properly contracted. "What's wrong with his time card?" I asked. He listed 40 hours instead of the 20 he actually worked. It got flagged by our automated system because the project was only budgeted for 20 hours. I was about to approve it anyway, figured it was just an error, but then I saw his last name matched yours. "Is he related to you?" My heart rate picked up, but my voice stayed calm. "He's my husband." Silence on the other end. Then, "Oh, should I have known that?" "No, there's no reason you would have. We have different last names professionally, but you're right to flag it. That's a significant discrepancy. I kept my tone neutral, professional. Send me the documentation. I'll review it tomorrow." "Are you sure? I mean, since he's your husband, maybe someone else should handle it?" "That's exactly why I should handle it. It would look worse if I tried to hide the relationship." "Don't worry, Caroline. I'll make sure everything's documented properly." After we hung up, I pulled up Blake's consulting contract on my laptop. Read through it carefully, checking dates and deliverables against the time card Caroline had mentioned. 20 hours. The contract clearly specified 20 hours of work. Blake had submitted a card claiming 40. Maybe it was an honest mistake. Maybe he'd copied an old time card template and forgotten to adjust the hours. It happened. Or maybe, and this thought settled like ice in my stomach, maybe he'd deliberately inflated his hours, assuming that because I worked at TechCore, no one would check carefully. That his relationship to me would provide cover for padding his bill. I closed my laptop and sat in the darkness of my office, thinking. If Blake had intentionally overcharged my company, that was fraud. Small scale, but fraud nonetheless. And if I ignored it, I'd be complicit. My job required me to report any financial irregularities, regardless of personal relationships. But if I reported it, I'd be opening an investigation into my own husband, an investigation that would become part of his permanent record at TechCore. That would certainly impact his job application. That would probably end any chance he had of ever working for my company. The choice should have been difficult. It wasn't. I opened my laptop and started drafting an email to our CFO, documenting the discrepancy and requesting a formal review. Copied Caroline and our legal department. Made sure every word was precise, every fact verifiable, every recommendation standard protocol. By the time I finished, it was nearly midnight. Blake had gone to bed hours ago. I saved the email to my drafts folder. I'd send it first thing Monday morning, after the board meeting but before the day's regular business. Timing mattered. Everything had to unfold in exactly the right order. I finally went to bed around 1 a.m., slipping under the covers carefully so as not to wake Blake. He stirred slightly, threw an arm across my waist in his sleep, a gesture that had once felt loving but now felt suffocating. I lay there in the darkness, listening to him breathe, thinking about the woman I used to be. The woman who'd married Blake 12 years ago, who'd believed they were partners, who'd thought they respected each other's work equally. That woman had been naive, had wanted to believe the best in people, had given Blake the benefit of the doubt 1,000 times over, explaining away small cruelties and thoughtless comments as stress or miscommunication. That woman was gone. She died somewhere between discovering Blake's secret job application and overhearing him mock her career to his friends. What remained was someone colder, more calculating. Someone who understood that trust, once broken, couldn't be repaired with apologies and promises. Someone who knew that the only thing that mattered in the end was protecting yourself, your career, your future. Someone who would use every tool at her disposal to ensure justice was served. Quietly, professionally, irreversibly. Blake shifted in his sleep, murmured something inaudible. I stared at the ceiling and counted the hours until Monday morning, until everything changed. Monday arrived with the inevitability of a tidal wave. I woke before the alarm, slipped out of bed while Blake still slept. Dressed in my favorite suit, navy blue, perfectly tailored, the one I wore when I needed to feel armored, applied makeup with careful precision, transforming my face into the professional mask I wore at work. By the time Blake stumbled into the kitchen, I was already reviewing my presentation slides on my laptop, coffee cooling beside me. "Big day?" he asked, pouring himself coffee. "Board meeting. Always stressful." I didn't look up from my screen. "You?" "Site inspection at the Riverside project. Should be gone most of the day. Good luck with that." We moved through our morning routines like strangers sharing a hotel room. Polite, distant, careful not to touch or make eye contact for too long. I left for work first, driving through early morning traffic while mentally rehearsing my presentation. The board meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m. I'd send the email about Blake's timecard discrepancy at 8:30, giving people just enough time to read it before the meeting, but not enough time to ask detailed questions. Timing was everything. TechCore's offices occupied 3 floors of a downtown high-rise with views of the river. I'd been here since the company was small enough to fit on half a floor. I'd hired most of the people currently working here. I knew their strengths, their weaknesses, their secrets. This was my territory, my domain. And Blake was about to learn what happened to people who underestimated me on my own turf. Caroline met me at my office door with her tablet and a worried expression. I flagged 3 more issues with that time card situation over the weekend. Do you have a minute? Come in. I set down my bag and pulled up the documentation she'd sent. What did you find? The project manager for that server room consultation says Blake only showed up twice. 2 visits, maybe 4 hours each. She documented everything because she thought his estimates seemed high even at 20 hours. Caroline pulled up photos on her tablet. These are time-stamped. Blake was only on site October 4th and October 11th. 8 hours total, maximum. My stomach clenched. Not 20 hours. 8. Blake had overcharged by 32 hours. At his consulting rate of $200 per hour, that was $6,400. That wasn't a mistake. That was deliberate fraud. Send me everything, I said quietly. Every timestamp, every photo, every communication. I need a complete record, Catherine. Caroline hesitated. I know he's your husband. Are you sure you want to handle this? It might be better if... If what? If someone else deals with it and it looks like I tried to hide his fraud? No. I met her eyes. This gets handled by the book. Professional standards apply to everyone, including my husband, especially my husband. She nodded slowly. Okay, I'll get you everything. After she left, I sat very still at my desk, processing 8 hours instead of 40. This wasn't padding a time card slightly. This was systematic theft. Had Blake done this before? At other companies? With other clients? I pulled up his consulting firm's website, started cross-referencing projects against payment records from companies where I had contacts in HR, made careful notes, found 3 other discrepancies, not as large as this one, but present, a pattern of overcharging by 20 to 30%. My phone buzzed. Text from Blake. Forgot to mention, I should hear back about that TechCore position this week. Keeping fingers crossed. I stared at the message for a long moment. The audacity of it. He'd submitted a fraudulent time card, was about to be exposed for systematic overbilling, and still expected me to help him get a job at my company. I typed back, "Good luck with that." Let him interpret it however he wanted. At 8:20, I finalized my email to the CFO, legal, and the head of facilities, detailed every discrepancy, attached all documentation, recommended a full audit of Blake's consulting work and immediate suspension of payment pending investigation, sent it at 8:30 exactly. 5 minutes later, my office phone rang. Our CFO, Harold Chen. Wait, no, Harold Park. I'd have to remember that. Catherine, I got your email. This is serious. I know. That's why I documented everything before sending it. He's your husband. That's irrelevant to whether he defrauded the company. The documentation is clear. He claimed 40 hours for work that took 8. That's a 32-hour discrepancy worth $6,400. Silence on the other end. Then, you're absolutely certain about the timeline. The project manager's records are accurate? Certain. Caroline triple-checked everything. We have photos with timestamps, sign-in sheets, security footage. Blake was on site exactly twice. Okay, I'm pulling this into a formal investigation. We'll need to interview you since you're the reporting party. I understand. I'll make myself available whenever needed. And Catherine? Harold's voice gentled slightly. I'm sorry, this can't be easy. It's not, but it's the right thing to do. After we hung up, I had 15 minutes before the board meeting. I used them to center myself, to put aside personal feelings and focus on professional obligations. The boardroom was on the top floor, with windows overlooking the entire downtown area. 12 members sat around the long mahogany table, founders, investors, outside advisors. I'd presented to this group dozens of times, had earned their respect through consistent excellence. Today would be no different. I walked them through the new hiring policy step by step, explained the legal reasoning, the ethical imperative, the protection it offered the company, showed examples of how current loopholes could be exploited, demonstrated how the new policy would strengthen our position. They asked good questions. I had good answers. By the end of the presentation, the vote was unanimous. The policy would go into effect immediately, applied retroactively to all applications currently under review. "Excellent work, Catherine," our CEO said as the meeting concluded. "This is exactly the kind of forward-thinking policy we need." Thank you. I'm glad we could address these issues proactively. I gathered my materials and headed back to my office, feeling the satisfaction of a plan executed flawlessly. Phase 1 complete. The policy was official. Blake's application would be flagged within hours. Caroline was waiting at my desk with an odd expression. "There's someone here to see you. He says it's urgent." "Who?" "Blake, your husband. He's in conference room B." My blood went cold. Blake was here? Now? How did he even know about the investigation yet? I walked to conference room B with measured steps, preparing myself. Opened the door to find Blake pacing the small space, his face flushed with anger. "You reported me," he said without preamble. "The CFO called me an hour ago. Said there's an investigation into my time card. You're the one who reported it. I reported a financial discrepancy. That's my job. I'm your husband, which is exactly why I had to report it. If I'd ignored it and someone else found it, I'd be complicit in fraud. You billed us for 40 hours of work that took you 8. What did you expect me to do? I expected you to trust me, to ask me about it first." He slammed his hand on the table. It was an honest mistake. I used an old time card template. I would have corrected it if you'd just mentioned it. An honest mistake. I kept my voice level. "Blake, I have documentation showing you've done this at 3 other companies. This isn't a one-time error, it's a pattern." His face went white. "You investigated me? Your own husband?" "I investigated a fraud allegation, yes." "The fact that you're my husband doesn't make you immune to professional standards. This is insane. You're destroying my career over a paperwork error." "No. You destroyed your own career by systematically overbilling clients. I'm just ensuring the appropriate consequences." I crossed my arms. "And while we're discussing consequences, you should know that your job application here has been flagged under our new nepotism policy. The one that passed this morning. The one that requires disclosure of family relationships before applications can be processed." He stared at me. "What? You applied to work at my company without telling me, without disclosing our marriage. That's a violation of company policy. Your application will be automatically rejected. You did this on purpose." His voice was low, dangerous. "You engineered this. The policy, the investigation, all of it. You're sabotaging me. I'm doing my job." If you'd been honest about the time card, about your application, about your opinions of my work, none of this would be happening. My opinions of your work? What does that? He stopped. Realization dawned. Saturday. You overheard me at the barbecue. I did. And then I discovered your secret job application. And then I found the fraudulent time card. Do you see the pattern, Blake? You've been dismissing my professional competence while simultaneously trying to profit from my position. You can't have it both ways. So this is revenge? You're punishing me for saying your job is pointless? I leaned forward, let him see the cold fury I'd been keeping carefully controlled. No, Blake, I'm not punishing you. I'm protecting my company from someone who has demonstrated poor judgment, questionable ethics, and a willingness to exploit personal relationships for professional gain. If you weren't my husband, you'd already be banned from ever working here. The only reason you're getting due process is because I'm recusing myself from the investigation. Catherine, please, this will ruin me. You ruined yourself. I'm just documenting it. I walked out of the conference room before he could respond. Heard him call my name, but I didn't stop. Just kept walking back to my office. Past curious stares from employees who'd seen my husband arrive angry. Let them look. Let them wonder. By tomorrow, everyone would know that the VP of HR had reported her own husband for fraud, that I'd chosen professional integrity over personal loyalty, that I was someone not to be underestimated. I closed my office door and sat at my desk, hands shaking now that Blake couldn't see them, took slow, deep breaths. This was harder than I'd expected. Seeing his face, hearing the betrayal in his voice, knowing that I was the architect of his professional destruction. But it was necessary. It was just. He'd earned every consequence coming his way. My phone buzzed. Text from Blake. I'm going to fight this. I'll get a lawyer. I'll prove you manipulated everything. I didn't respond. Let him waste money on lawyers. Let him try to prove that standard workplace policies and professional ethics standards were somehow targeted at him specifically. He'd lose. Because I documented everything. Because every step I'd taken was justifiable. Because proving manipulation required evidence of malicious intent, and I'd been very careful to ensure all my actions served legitimate business purposes. Another text. I can't believe you do this. After everything we've been through, 12 years of marriage, and you throw it away over one stupid comment? No, I responded. I'm not throwing anything away. You did that when you defrauded my company and lied about your application. I'm just refusing to be complicit in your dishonesty anymore. The next text took several minutes. I want a divorce. I stared at those 4 words for a long time, felt something crack open in my chest. Not surprised I'd known this was coming, but acknowledging it, seeing it in writing, made it real in a way it hadn't been before. I typed back, okay, just that, just acknowledgement. Because what else was there to say? We'd loved each other once, built a life together, made promises about forever. And now it was ending, not with drama or passion, but with text messages sent from separate buildings while we destroyed each other professionally. Caroline knocked on my door. The investigation team wants to interview you at 2. Are you available? Yes, thank you. Catherine, are you okay? I'm fine. Just another Monday. She didn't look convinced, but she left. I turned to my computer and started working through emails, forcing myself to focus on the hundreds of small tasks that made up my job. The job Blake had called pointless. The job that was currently dismantling his career piece by piece. By 5 p.m., I'd completed my interview with the investigation team, answered every question with careful precision. By 6, Blake's consulting contract had been officially terminated. By 7, his application had been formally rejected with a flag preventing resubmission. By 8 p.m., I was sitting alone in my empty office, looking out at the city lights and thinking about how thoroughly I destroyed my marriage in pursuit of professional justice. And wondering if I'd made a terrible mistake. No, I pushed that thought away. Blake had made the mistakes. I just ensured he faced appropriate consequences. That's what I told myself as I finally drove home to a house that suddenly felt much too large and empty. That's what I repeated like a mantra as I opened the door to find Blake's closet empty and a note on the kitchen counter, "Staying at Tyler's. We'll figure out logistics later." That's what I whispered to myself as I sat alone in the darkness, holding a coffee mug and watching nothing. Justice had been served. The system had worked. Professional integrity had been maintained. So why did victory taste like ash? The house was too quiet without Blake. I'd never realized how much noise one person made. Footsteps in the hallway, the buzz of his electric razor in the morning, the television murmuring downstairs. Now there was only silence, broken occasionally by the settling of the house or the distant sound of traffic. I didn't sleep well that Monday night. Kept reaching for Blake's warmth beside me, finding only empty sheets. Finally gave up around 3 a.m. and went downstairs to make coffee, sitting in the dark kitchen while the city slept around me. My phone sat on the counter, dark and silent. No calls from Blake, no texts, just silence from both sides of our fractured marriage. Tuesday morning, I went to work early, arriving before Caroline or most of the staff. Used the quiet hours to prepare for what came next, the legal proceedings, the documentation, the careful dismantling of a 12-year partnership. Because Blake was wrong about one thing, I hadn't engineered all of this in response to Saturday's humiliation. I'd been documenting problems for 3 months, since the day I discovered his secret job application. Saturday had simply been the final straw. 3 months ago, I'd stumbled across Blake's LinkedIn messages while using his laptop to order takeout. He'd left his account logged in, and a notification had popped up, a message from a TechCore recruiter thanking him for his interest and promising to review his application. My company. He was trying to get hired at my company without telling me. I'd felt frozen, staring at that notification. Then I'd clicked through, read the entire conversation, watched Blake position himself as an independent candidate, carefully avoiding any mention that his wife was a VP there. Watched him try to leverage the recruiter's enthusiasm without revealing our relationship. That's when I knew. Not just that Blake was unhappy, but that he was willing to deceive me, manipulate systems, and exploit my position while claiming to respect my independence. That's when I'd started paying attention, really paying attention, and I'd found the pattern of overbilling, the small exaggerations on resumes, the way he'd talk about his projects to make them seem more significant than they were, the casual dishonesty that had become so routine he probably didn't even recognize it as lying anymore. 3 months of documentation. 3 months of careful observation, 3 months of building an airtight case. Saturday had just given me the final piece proof that his disrespect wasn't accidental or stress-related. It was genuine. He really did think my work was worthless, my career meaningless, my contributions forgettable. So I'd finalized my plan. Moved all the pieces into position. And now here we were. Caroline arrived at 8, looking worried. "How are you holding up?" "I'm fine." "Catherine, your husband left you and his career is imploding. You're allowed to not be fine." "He didn't leave me. He's staying with a friend while we figure things out, and his career problems are self-inflicted." I opened my laptop, started reviewing emails. "I have work to do." "Okay, but if you need to talk, I don't. Thank you." She left, clearly unconvinced, but knowing when to stop pushing. I appreciated that about Caroline. She understood professional boundaries. The investigation team sent their preliminary findings at 9:30. Blake had overbilled TechCore by $6,400. He'd likely overbilled other clients by similar amounts. They recommended immediate termination of his contract, recovery of fraudulent charges, and blacklisting from future business relationships. They also recommended I be cleared of any wrongdoing. I'd reported the fraud promptly, recused myself from decisions about Blake's employment, and maintained professional standards throughout. My integrity was intact. My career secure. My reputation enhanced, if anything, by my willingness to prioritize company interests over personal relationships. Everything was working out exactly as planned. So why did I feel hollow? My office phone rang. I picked up automatically. "Catherine Warren. Catherine, it's Blake's mother." Helen's voice was tight with barely suppressed anger. "We need to talk about what you've done to my son." I closed my eyes. Of course, Blake would have called his parents, told them his version of events, painted himself as the victim of his vindictive wife. "Hello, Helen. What would you like to discuss? You reported him for fraud? Your own husband? I reported financial irregularities that our company discovered during routine auditing. The fact that Blake is my husband doesn't change the company's obligation to investigate. He made a mistake with a time card, an honest mistake, and you're destroying his career over it." "Helen, Blake claimed 40 hours for work that took 8 hours. That's not a mistake. That's theft. He would never. You must be mistaken about the hours. Blake is meticulous about his time cards. We have photo evidence, timestamps, and security footage. He billed for work he didn't perform, multiple times, at multiple companies. This isn't a one-time error." Silence. Then, "I don't believe you. Blake wouldn't do that. Whether you believe me is irrelevant. The evidence is documented. The investigation concluded. Blake's contract has been terminated. And his job application? You rejected that too, out of spite. Blake applied to work at my company without disclosing our relationship, which violates our nepotism policies. His application was automatically rejected when that came to light. I had nothing to do with the decision. I recused myself from the entire process. This is revenge." Helen's voice rose. "You're punishing him for something, and I want to know what. What did my son do to deserve this?" I considered telling her the truth. About Saturday's barbecue, about Blake's dismissive comments, about 3 months of documented deception. But what would be the point? Helen would never believe her son was capable of systematic dishonesty. "I'm doing my job, Helen. That's all. If Blake has a different story, I suggest you ask him for specifics. He says you've been cold and distant for months, that you care more about your career than your marriage, that you're never home, and he told you this when? Recently? Or has he been complaining about me for a while?" More silence. "Blake has been unhappy for over a year, hasn't he?" I pressed. "He's been telling you I'm a bad wife, that I don't support him, that my job is ridiculous and pointless. He's been building a narrative where I'm the villain long before any of this happened. That's not, it is. And you believed him because he's your son and you love him. But Helen, I need you to consider something. If I'm such a terrible wife, why would Blake try to get a job at my company? Why would he want to work at a place where I have authority and influence? No answer. He wanted my position to benefit him while simultaneously telling everyone who'd listen that my work was worthless. You can't have it both ways. Either my job is important enough that working there would advance his career, or it's pointless and he had no business applying. Which is it? Helen's voice was quieter now. He's my son. Of course I believe him. I understand. But belief doesn't change facts. Blake committed fraud. That's documented. Blake violated company policies. That's documented. Whatever else is happening in our marriage, those facts remain true. After she hung up angry but uncertain now, I sat very still. That conversation would repeat itself over the coming weeks. Blake's friends, his family, possibly some of my own relatives who'd always liked Blake better than they liked me. They'd all want to know why I'd destroyed my marriage over workplace policies. Why I'd chosen my career over my husband. Why I couldn't just let it go. None of them would understand that I hadn't destroyed anything. Blake had. I just refused to help him cover it up. The rest of Tuesday passed in a blur of meetings and emails. I worked late, avoiding the empty house. When I finally drove home at 9 p.m., I found a moving truck in my driveway and Blake loading boxes. I parked on the street and watched for a moment. Tyler was helping. I recognized his truck. They were moving efficiently, professionally. Blake had clearly been planning this. I got out of my car and approached slowly. Blake saw me, stiffened, but kept working. "Taking your stuff?" I asked. Unnecessary question, but I needed to say something. "Yeah, Tyler's letting me stay in his guest room until I find a place." "Okay." We stood there awkwardly. 12 years of marriage and neither of us knew what to say. Catherine Blake started, "Don't." I held up a hand. "Whatever you're about to say, just don't. We're past explanations." I wasn't going to explain. I was going to apologize. That surprised me. I'd expected anger, defensiveness, accusations. Not an apology. For what? I asked. The fraud, the lies, the job application, the barbecue comments? Which particular betrayal are you apologizing for? He flinched. All of it. You're right, I've been dishonest. With you, with clients, with myself. I convinced myself that padding hours a little was normal, that everyone did it, and I convinced myself that your job was less important than mine because it made me feel better about earning less than you. I stared at him. In 12 years, I'd never heard Blake admit to professional insecurity. He'd always projected confidence, even arrogance, about his abilities. "You resented my salary?" I asked quietly. "Yeah, and your title, and the respect you got." You'd mention board meetings or policy decisions, and I'd feel small, like I was just building things, while you were building a career that actually mattered. He set down the box he was holding. So I told myself your job was easy, that it was just managing people's feelings, nothing substantial, that anyone could do it if they were willing to waste time on corporate politics. But you wanted to work there, because the pay was better than what I was making. The hypocrisy didn't even register. I wanted your salary without respecting the work that earned it. We stood there in the driveway, 12 years of resentment finally spoken aloud. "You should have told me," I said. "Instead of lying and stealing and sabotaging, I know. I was ashamed." And by the time I realized how bad it had gotten, I was in too deep. The overbilling, the secret application, all of it, I kept thinking I'd fix it, make it right, and you'd never need to know. But I did find out, and I had to report it. You understand that, right? I didn't have a choice. You had a choice. His voice was gentle, not accusatory. You could have come to me first, confronted me privately, given me a chance to make it right before involving the company. And would you have made it right? He was quiet for a long moment. Then, I don't know, probably not. I'd have made excuses, blamed stress, promised to fix it, and then I'd have kept doing it because I always had before. That's why I reported it officially. Because private conversations don't create paper trails. They don't protect the company or establish consequences. They just let people keep lying. I get it, I do. You did your job, maintained your professional integrity, protected your company. He picked up the box again. But you also destroyed our marriage. And maybe that was necessary too. Maybe we've been broken for a while and neither of us wanted to admit it. I felt tears prick my eyes for the first time since this started. Because he was right. We had been broken, probably for years. The fraud and the job application were just symptoms of deeper problems we'd both ignored. "I'm sorry too," I said quietly, "for not seeing how unhappy you were, for not making space to talk about the money stuff, for letting work consume so much of my energy that I didn't notice our marriage falling apart. We both let it fall apart. That's on both of us." Tyler appeared in the doorway, saw me, and quickly went back inside, giving us privacy. "What happens now?" I asked. "I'm meeting with a lawyer tomorrow. Figure out the divorce paperwork, division of assets, all the practical stuff." Blake shifted his weight. "And I'm going to therapy, trying to figure out why I became someone who lies and steals and justifies it. That's good." "I hope it helps. What about you? What are you going to do?" I thought about that. What was I going to do? My career was secure, my integrity intact. But my marriage was over, my house felt empty, and victory in this situation didn't feel like winning. "I don't know," I admitted. "Keep working, I guess. Figure out who I am when I'm not married to you. Try to forgive myself for choosing my job over my marriage. You didn't choose your job over your marriage. You chose integrity over complicity. That's different. Is it? Because from where I'm standing, they look awfully similar." He smiled sadly. "Maybe, but you did the right thing, Catherine. I'm angry about it, and it's destroying my career. And I'll probably resent you for years. But you did the right thing. That acknowledgement meant more than it should have. More than I wanted it to. Thank you for saying that. Yeah. Well, he picked up another box. I should finish loading up. Tyler wants to get home. Okay, let me know if you need anything. From the house, I mean. I will. I went inside while they finished loading. Didn't watch Blake drive away. Just sat in the living room we'd furnished together and stared at the empty spaces where his things used to be. The house felt enormous, museum quiet, like I was the only person left in the world. I pulled out my phone and called my sister, Angela. She answered on the second ring. "Hey, Catherine, what's up? Blake left. We're getting divorced." Silence. Then, "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry. What happened? So I told her. All of it. The fraud, the job application, the barbecue comments, the investigation. Spoke for 30 minutes straight while Angela listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "You did the right thing. Everyone keeps saying that. Because it's true. Blake committed fraud. You reported it. Your job required it. That's not a choice between your career and your marriage. That's basic ethics. It doesn't feel that simple. It is that simple. It just doesn't feel good. Doing the right thing often doesn't. But Catherine, what was the alternative? Let him steal from your company? Cover for him? Compromise your professional integrity? No, I couldn't do that. Exactly. So you did what you had to do, and now you deal with the consequences. Which suck, obviously. But they're his consequences that spilled over onto you, not consequences you created. I wanted to believe that. Wanted to accept that I'd just been doing my job, that Blake's problems were his own making. But late that night, lying alone in my bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd engineered all of this, that I'd taken Blake's betrayal and weaponized it, that my revenge had been perfect and professional and completely justified and also cruel in a way I hadn't fully anticipated. Because the thing about professional revenge is it works. It destroys people efficiently, thoroughly, legally, but it also destroys you a little bit. Takes something soft and human inside you and replaces it with something harder, colder. I'd won. Blake's career was in ruins, his reputation damaged, his future uncertain. And I was lying alone in an empty house, wondering if winning was worth the cost. Wednesday morning brought rain, cold, steady, the kind that matched the grey emptiness I felt. I called in sick for the first time in 2 years, couldn't face the office and the curious stares and the whispered conversations about my imploding marriage. Instead, I stayed in bed until noon, staring at the ceiling, thinking about nothing and everything. Angela called twice. I didn't answer. Caroline texted asking if I was okay. I sent back a thumbs-up emoji and turned off my phone. By afternoon, the silence was suffocating. I dragged myself to the shower, dressed in sweatpants and one of Blake's old college shirts he'd left behind. Found myself wandering through the house, noticing empty spaces. His architectural magazines gone from the coffee table, his favorite coffee mug missing from the kitchen, the study that had been his home office now just a room with a desk and empty bookshelves. We'd built this house together. Well, I'd bought it, but we'd made it a home, painted walls, hung pictures, argued about furniture placement. Every room held memories, both good and bad. Now it just felt like a museum of a marriage that had failed. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table, Blake's note from Monday still lying where he'd left it. Staying at Tyler's. We'll figure out logistics later. Logistics. That's what we'd become. A set of assets to divide, legal documents to file, a partnership to dissolve. My phone buzzed. I turned it back on without thinking. Text from an unknown number. This is Tyler. Blake asked me to reach out. He wants to know if you're willing to mediate the divorce instead of going through litigation. It would be faster and cheaper for both of you. I stared at the message. Mediation meant sitting in a room with Blake and a neutral third party, dividing our lives calmly and rationally. Litigation meant lawyers and courtrooms and dragging everything into public record. I typed back, I'm willing to mediate. Have Blake contact my lawyer. Then I added Patricia Knox's information, the same attorney who'd helped me 3 years ago when my previous boss had tried to fire me for reporting his harassment of a junior employee. Patricia knew how to handle difficult situations professionally. She'd helped me navigate this divorce the same way she'd helped me navigate that workplace nightmare, with documentation, strategy, and absolute clarity about my rights. Another text, this time from Blake's number. Thank you. I'll call your lawyer tomorrow. And Catherine, I really am sorry. For everything, I didn't respond. What was there to say? Sorry didn't fix fraud, didn't repair trust, didn't undo 3 months of lies. Thursday, I went back to work. Walked into the office with my head high, my expression professional, my armor firmly in place. Ignored the curious looks and whispered conversations. Focused on work. Caroline brought me coffee and a stack of reports, without comment. I appreciated her discretion. The day passed in a blur of meetings and emails. Normal work, routine tasks, nothing extraordinary. By 5 p.m., I was exhausted from maintaining my professional facade. I was packing up to leave when Harold, our CFO, knocked on my door. Got a minute? Of course. Come in. He sat across from my desk, looking uncomfortable. I wanted to talk about the Blake situation. The investigation concluded. The fraud is documented and clear. We're moving forward with recovering the funds and terminating all business relationships. Good. That's appropriate. But there's something else. Something that came up during the investigation. He pulled out a folder, set it on my desk. Blake's consulting contract was signed by you. You approved his rates, his hours, everything. My stomach dropped. Yes. That was 3 months ago, before I knew about the fraud. I understand that. But it raises a question about oversight. You approved a contract for your spouse without flagging it as a potential conflict of interest. That's why not great, Catherine. I felt heat rise in my face. You're right. I should have disclosed the relationship and recused myself from the approval process. That was an error in judgment. Not just an error, a violation of our conflict of interest policies. The same policies you help enforce for other employees. He looked genuinely regretful. The board wants me to put a formal reprimand in your file. A reprimand. Not termination, but a permanent mark on my record. A stain on the professional reputation I'd spent 20 years building. I understand, I said quietly. I'll accept the reprimand. I'm sorry, Catherine. I know this is a difficult time, but we have to apply our policies consistently. After he left, I sat alone in my office, feeling the weight of consequences I hadn't fully anticipated. I'd destroyed Blake's career to maintain professional integrity, and now that same integrity required me to accept punishment for my own failures. The irony was sharp enough to cut. I pulled out my phone and called Patricia. Catherine, I got Blake's call about mediation. Are you sure that's what you want? Yes. I don't want this dragged out in court. I just want it over. Okay, I'll set it up. But I need to ask, are you doing all right? This has to be incredibly stressful. I'm fine. Catherine, I'm your lawyer, not your therapist. But I've known you for 3 years. You're not fine. You just ended your marriage and your career took a hit. It's okay to admit this is hard. I felt tears prick my eyes, blinked them back. It is hard, but I did the right thing. I keep telling myself that. I did the right thing. You did. But doing the right thing doesn't make it hurt less. Patricia's voice was gentle. Have you thought about talking to someone? A therapist? I don't need therapy. I just need to get through the divorce and move on. Okay. But the offer stands. If you need to talk, I'm here. And if you need a professional to talk to, I can recommend someone. After we hung up, I stayed in my office until nearly 8 p.m. Didn't want to go home to that empty house. Didn't want to face the silence and the spaces where Blake used to be. Finally, Caroline knocked on my open door. "You're still here?" "Just finishing up some work. Catherine, it's 8 o'clock. Go home, get some rest. The work will still be here tomorrow. I know. I stopped. What was I doing? Hiding from my own life?" "Go home," Caroline repeated. "Gentler. Take care of yourself." So I went home, ordered takeout, sat on the couch watching nothing on TV. Went to bed early and lay awake for hours, thinking about everything and nothing. Friday brought the first mediation session. Patricia and I arrived at the mediator's office at 9 a.m. Blake and his lawyer, a guy named Thomas Brennan, were already there. Blake looked terrible, tired, drawn, like he hadn't slept in days. We made eye contact briefly, then looked away. The mediator, a woman named Susan Park, walked us through the process. Division of assets, debt allocation, the practical dismantling of a shared life. We'd been smart about money during the marriage. Separate accounts for personal expenses, joint account for household bills. No significant debt beyond the mortgage. This should be straightforward, except it wasn't. Because every item we discussed carried emotional weight. The house, should we sell it, or should one of us buy out the other? The furniture, who took what? The retirement accounts we'd built together? 3 hours of careful negotiation. 3 hours of treating our marriage like a business transaction. 3 hours of Blake and me being professionally polite while our lawyers handled the details. By noon, we'd made minimal progress. Susan suggested, "We take a break, reconvene next week." As we were leaving, Blake caught my arm gently. "Can we talk? Just the two of us?" I looked at Patricia. She nodded. "I'll wait in the car." Blake and I walked to a nearby park, sat on a bench overlooking a pond, didn't speak for several minutes. "I got fired," he finally said. "Harrison Engineering let me go yesterday. Said the fraud investigation made me a liability. My reputation in the industry is destroyed. I didn't know what to say. This was what I'd wanted, wasn't it? For Blake to face consequences? Except now, hearing the defeat in his voice, I felt only sadness. "I'm sorry," I said, and meant it. "Are you? Because this is what you wanted. You reported me knowing it would destroy my career. I reported fraud. What your employer did with that information was their choice, not mine. You knew what would happen. Don't pretend you didn't." He turned to face me. "I'm not saying you were wrong to report it. I committed fraud. I deserved consequences. But let's not pretend this wasn't exactly what you wanted." He was right. I had known, had anticipated every domino that would fall. "What do you want me to say, Blake? That I'm sorry your career is ruined?" "I am." "That I wish I'd handled things differently?" "I don't." "I did what I had to do, what you had to do." He laughed bitterly. "You're a VP of Human Resources, Catherine. Your whole job is finding ways to handle situations that protect people while maintaining standards. But you didn't try to find a middle ground. You went straight to maximum consequences because you'd been lying for months. The job application, the overbilling, all of it. When was I supposed to trust you'd stopped lying? You could have asked me, confronted me, given me a chance to come clean, and you would have lied again. We both know that. We sat in silence, both knowing the truth. Blake would have lied. I would have reported him anyway. The outcome was inevitable the moment I discovered his deceptions. "I'm staying with Tyler until I find an apartment," Blake said eventually. "Probably going to have to leave the city. My reputation here is shot. Maybe I'll go to Portland or Seattle. Start over somewhere people don't know about the fraud. That's probably smart. Yeah. And we'll finish the mediation. Divide everything fairly. Try to end this with whatever dignity we have left." He stood up. "But I want you to know something, Catherine. You were right about almost everything. I was dishonest. I defrauded your company. I disrespected your work. I deserved what happened. Okay. But you were wrong about one thing. You said you were just doing your job, that personal feelings didn't factor into your decisions. That's not true. You were angry, hurt. You wanted to punish me for what I said at the barbecue. And you found the perfect professional justification to do it." I opened my mouth to deny it. Stopped. Because he was right about that too. "Maybe," I admitted. "Maybe I was angrier than I wanted to admit. Maybe I used my professional authority to punish you personally. But Blake, you gave me the ammunition. Everything I reported was true. If you hadn't actually committed fraud, I'd have had nothing to report." "I know. That's what makes this so perfect. You destroyed me using only the truth, the most elegant revenge possible." He walked away before I could respond, left me sitting alone on that park bench, feeling the weight of what I'd done, because he was absolutely right. My revenge had been perfect, professional, justified by facts and policies and professional standards, and also deeply personal, driven by hurt and anger and the need to prove that my job, my career, my life's work wasn't pointless. I'd won. Blake was ruined, and I felt hollower than I'd ever felt in my life. The weekend stretched out endlessly. Saturday morning I tried to work from home, couldn't focus. Went for a long walk instead, found myself at the park where Blake and I used to have coffee on Sunday mornings. A young couple sat at our favourite bench, laughing over something on a phone. They looked happy, in love, oblivious to how quickly everything could fall apart. I kept walking. Sunday, Angela drove up to check on me. Found me still in pyjamas at 2 p.m. The house a mess, dishes piled in the sink. "Okay," she said, surveying the damage. "This stops now. Go shower. I'm cleaning the kitchen and then we're going out for dinner. I don't want to go out. I don't care. You've been hiding in this house for a week. It's time to rejoin the human race." "Angela, I'm fine. You're not fine. You're falling apart. And that's okay. You're allowed to fall apart. Your marriage ended, but you can't stay here drowning in it." She pointed toward the stairs. "Shower. Now. Or I'm physically dragging you there." I knew that tone. Angela didn't make empty threats. I showered, dressed in actual clothes, let Angela drive me to a restaurant downtown. We sat at a quiet table in the back, ordered wine and pasta, tried to have a normal conversation. "How's work?" Angela asked. I got a formal reprimand for approving Blake's consulting contract without disclosing the conflict of interest. That sucks. But it's not termination, right? No, just a mark on my record. A permanent reminder of my poor judgment. You didn't have poor judgment. You trusted your husband. That's not a character flaw. It is when your job is literally identifying and preventing conflicts of interest. I helped draft these policies, Angela. I enforced them for other people, and I violated them myself. She sipped her wine. You're human. You made a mistake. You're facing consequences. That's how accountability works, even for the people in charge of enforcing it. Doesn't make it feel better. It's not supposed to feel better. It's supposed to feel fair, which is different. We ate in silence for a while. Then Angela said, "Can I ask you something? And I want you to really think about it before answering." "Okay. Do you regret reporting Blake?" I started to say no, automatically. Stopped. Actually thought about it. "I don't know," I admitted. I don't regret upholding professional standards. I don't regret protecting my company. But I do regret that it cost me my marriage, even though the marriage was already broken. Does that make sense? Perfect sense. You can do the right thing and still grieve what it cost. Angela reached across the table, squeezed my hand. That's what makes you human. If you felt nothing, if you didn't care about the consequences, that would be sociopathic. This is just painful. I wanted him to hurt, I said quietly. When I heard him at that barbecue, mocking my work, I wanted him to understand exactly what I do, what I'm capable of. I wanted him to regret underestimating me. And I got what I wanted. He understands now. His career is destroyed, his reputation ruined. He'll spend years recovering from this, if he ever fully recovers. I used every tool at my disposal to ensure maximum damage, using only true information and legitimate policies. Yes. But knowing how to use those tools, knowing exactly where to strike to cause the most harm, that's not justice. That's revenge. Angela considered that. Maybe it's both. Maybe revenge and justice aren't always opposites. Blake committed fraud. That's a fact. You reported it. That's your job. The fact that you also wanted him to suffer doesn't negate the legitimacy of your actions, doesn't it? Doesn't motive matter? In criminal law, sure. But in workplace ethics? Results matter. You exposed fraud. You protected your company. You upheld professional standards. The fact that you were personally hurt by Blake's actions doesn't make your response less valid. I wanted to believe that, wanted to accept that I'd simply done my job, that my personal feelings were incidental. But late that night, back home alone, I couldn't shake the feeling that Angela was wrong. That motive did matter, that I'd weaponized my professional authority for personal revenge. And that made me exactly the kind of person I'd spent my career trying to prevent from abusing power. Monday brought the second mediation session. We made more progress this time, agreed the house would be sold and proceeds split equally, agreed on division of retirement accounts, worked through the smaller assets methodically. By the end of the session, we had a draft settlement. One more meeting to finalize details, then the divorce would be complete. Blake and I didn't talk beyond what was necessary, didn't make eye contact, didn't acknowledge the years of history between us. Just business, professional, cold. Tuesday morning, I arrived at work to find Harold waiting at my office. "We need to talk," he said. My stomach dropped. "About what?" "The board met yesterday. There are concerns about your judgment. The Blake situation, the reprimand, some members are questioning whether you should continue in your current role. I felt ice spread through my chest. They want to fire me? No. But they want you to take a leave of absence. 2 months. Paid. Time to deal with your personal situation and come back with a clear head. That's basically firing me with extra steps. It's not. It's acknowledging that you're going through a difficult time and might benefit from space. The work will be here when you get back. And if I refuse, then we have a different conversation. one that ends with your resignation. So it was an ultimatum. Take the leave or leave permanently. When would this start? Immediately. We'd like you to transition your responsibilities this week and start leave on Monday. I thought about fighting, about demanding my rights, about pushing back against what felt like punishment for doing the right thing. But I was tired, so tired of fighting, of maintaining professional facades, of pretending I wasn't falling apart. Okay, I said, I'll take the leave. Harold looked relieved. Thank you. I know this isn't easy, but I think it's the right call. For you and for the company. I spent the rest of the week transitioning my responsibilities to Caroline and other team members. Documented everything, organized files, made sure nothing would fall through the cracks during my absence. By Friday afternoon, I was done. My office was clean, my laptop turned in, my badge deactivated. I drove home feeling unmoored. For 20 years, my work had defined me, my identity, my purpose, my value, and now it was suspended, put on hold, taken away, all because I'd reported my husband for fraud. No, because I'd approved his contract without disclosing our relationship. Because I'd violated the same policies I enforced for others. Because my judgment had been compromised by personal relationships. Because I'd proven I was as fallible as anyone else. I spent the weekend in a fog. Didn't shower, didn't leave the house, barely ate. Just existed in the empty spaces, wondering how everything had fallen apart so completely. Sunday evening, Angela called. I haven't heard from you in 3 days. Are you alive? Barely. What happened? I'm on mandatory leave, 2 months. The board thinks I need time to get my head straight. Oh, Catherine, I'm so sorry. Don't be. They're right. I'm a mess. I reported my husband, destroyed his career, violated my own professional standards, and got a reprimand. I'm exactly the kind of person who shouldn't be making HR decisions right now. You're being too hard on yourself. Am I? Because from where I'm standing, I'm someone who used professional authority for personal revenge. That's literally the definition of abuse of power. That's not what happened. It is, though. I knew reporting Blake would destroy his career. I knew it would end our marriage. I knew all the consequences. And I did it anyway because I was hurt and angry and wanted him to suffer. He committed fraud, yes, and I made sure he faced maximum consequences for it because I could. Because I had the power and the knowledge and the professional justification. That's not justice. That's revenge. Angela was quiet for a long moment. What are you going to do? I don't know. Take my leave. Figure out who I am when I'm not working. Try to forgive myself for becoming someone I don't recognize. You're still you, Catherine. You're just hurt and angry and dealing with consequences of doing what you thought was right, what I thought was right, or what I wanted. Maybe both. Maybe that's okay. After we hung up, I sat in the darkness of my living room, thinking about who I'd become. The woman who'd reported her husband, who'd engineered his professional destruction, who'd used every tool at her disposal to ensure he suffered. Was that justice or revenge? I didn't know anymore. The lines had blurred so completely I couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. All I knew was that I'd won. Blake's career was destroyed. My professional integrity was intact, if tarnished, and I was more alone than I'd ever been in my life. Victory, it turned out, was a very cold place to live. The first week of my forced leave, I did nothing. Stayed in pajamas, ordered delivery, watched mindless television, avoided mirrors, because I couldn't stand to see what I'd become. Angela came by Wednesday, let herself in with the key I'd given her years ago, found me on the couch, surrounded by takeout containers. "Okay, this is officially an intervention," she said, opening windows. "You're wallowing. I'm processing. You're drowning. There's a difference." She started cleaning up the mess, talking while she worked. "I love you, but this stops today. You're taking a shower, putting on real clothes, and we're going for a walk. I don't want to. I don't care what you want. You can't stay in this house feeling sorry for yourself. What happened with Blake was painful. What's happening at work sucks. But you're still here, still alive, still capable of moving forward. So move." She was right. I knew she was right. I just didn't have the energy to care. But Angela was persistent. She physically pulled me off the couch, pushed me toward the bathroom, stood outside the door while I showered. When I emerged, she'd laid out clothes and was waiting with coffee. "Now we're going to the park," she said. "You're going to get fresh air and sunlight and remember what it feels like to be human." We walked for an hour. I didn't talk much, but the movement helped. The physical activity, the sunshine, the sight of other people living normal lives. It reminded me that the world kept turning even when my personal world had imploded. "Tell me what you're thinking," Angela said as we sat on a bench overlooking the river. "I'm thinking I destroyed 2 careers because I couldn't control my anger, Blake's and mine." "You didn't destroy your career. You're on leave, not fired. Same thing. The board doesn't trust my judgment. They're right not to." "Catherine, stop!" "You made one mistake approving Blake's contract without disclosure. One mistake in 20 years. That doesn't erase everything else you've accomplished. It doesn't matter. I've proven I can't separate personal feelings from professional obligations. That's disqualifying for someone in my position. So you're going to give up? Let this define you?" I turned to look at her. What else am I supposed to do? Pretend everything's fine? Go back to work in 2 months and act like nothing happened? No, you're supposed to learn from this. Figure out what went wrong, what you'd do differently, how to prevent it from happening again. Then you go back to work better than you were before. I don't know if I can do that. Of course you can. You're Catherine Warren. You've built HR departments from scratch, navigated impossible workplace conflicts, helped hundreds of people through difficult situations. This is just one more difficult situation, except this time you're the one who needs help. I wanted to believe her, wanted to think I could recover from this, rebuild my reputation, move forward. But the weight of guilt and shame was crushing. I wanted to hurt him, I said quietly. When I reported Blake, when I engineered his professional destruction, I wanted him to suffer. That's not professional ethics. That's personal vendetta. Maybe it was both. Maybe you can uphold professional standards and also feel satisfaction when someone who hurt you faces consequences. Those things aren't mutually exclusive. They should be. People in my position can't let personal feelings drive professional decisions. But you're also human. You can't completely separate the two, and maybe that's okay as long as your actions are justified by facts and policies. Does it matter if you also felt personally satisfied by the outcome? I thought about that. About whether motive mattered when the actions themselves were legitimate. I think it does matter, I said finally, because if I can justify using my professional authority for personal revenge, what stops anyone else from doing the same? What makes me different from every abusive boss I've had to discipline? The difference is your actions were based on truth. Blake actually committed fraud. You actually had an obligation to report it. The fact that you were personally hurt doesn't change those facts. We sat in silence for a while, watching the river flow past. Eventually, Angela said, "Can I tell you something? About when you and Blake got married?" "Okay, I never thought it would last. You two were so different. You were driven, ambitious, focused. Blake was talented but lazy, always looking for shortcuts. I thought eventually those differences would cause problems." "Why didn't you say anything?" "Because you loved him, and I hoped I was wrong." "But Catherine, this thing with the fraud." That's who Blake has always been. Someone who takes shortcuts, who inflates his accomplishments, who's willing to bend rules if it benefits him. You're just seeing it clearly now, instead of through love-colored glasses. That doesn't make what I did right. No, but it means you weren't wrong about him. He really was dishonest. He really did deserve consequences. You didn't create a false narrative or manufacture evidence. You just stopped covering for him. I wasn't covering for him. I didn't know, you didn't know about the fraud specifically, but you knew Blake exaggerated his hours, inflated his role on projects, took credit for other people's work. You've known for years. You just looked the other way because he was your husband. That hit hard because it was true. I had noticed Blake's tendency to stretch the truth, had caught him in small lies, had seen the ways he positioned himself to look more important than he was. I'd just never called him on it, had rationalized it as normal self-promotion, the kind everyone did in business. So you're saying I'm not responsible for Blake's career being destroyed. I'm saying Blake is responsible for Blake's career being destroyed. He committed fraud. He lied. He tried to exploit your position. Those were his choices. You just stopped protecting him from the consequences. I wanted to believe that. Wanted to accept that I'd simply enforce standard policies, that Blake's downfall was his own doing, but I couldn't shake the image of myself carefully engineering every step, planning the timing of the ethics policy, ensuring his application would be flagged, documenting every piece of evidence. That wasn't just enforcement. That was strategy. "I need to think," I said, standing up. "Can we go home?" Angela drove me back, walked me to the door. "Promise me you won't spend the rest of the day wallowing." "I promise." "I'm going to clean up, make real food, try to be a functional human." "Good. Call me if you need anything." After she left, I did clean up. Threw away all the takeout containers. Did dishes. Vacuumed. Physical tasks that didn't require thinking. Then I sat at my kitchen table with a notebook and started writing. Not about Blake or work or the divorce. Just about me. Who I was. What I valued. What kind of person I wanted to be. I'd spent 20 years building a career on professional ethics, on doing the right thing even when it was difficult. But somewhere along the way, I'd lost sight of the difference between enforcing standards and weaponizing them. Blake had deserved consequences. That was true. But I'd made sure those consequences were as severe as possible because I was hurt and angry. That was the part I had to face. The part where my motivations weren't pure professional obligation but personal vindication. I wrote for hours until my hand cramped and my eyes burned. Filled pages with thoughts and questions and uncomfortable truths. By the time I finished, night had fallen and my stomach was growling. I made an actual meal pasta with vegetables, something healthy and nourishing. As I ate, I realized something. I couldn't change what I'd done. couldn't take back the report or the investigation or the consequences Blake had faced. But I could decide who I was going forward, could learn from this, could make sure I never again used professional authority for personal revenge, could become someone who upheld ethics because they mattered, not because they were convenient weapons. It wasn't absolution, wasn't forgiveness, just acknowledgement that I'd made mistakes and had to live with them. That would have to be enough. The second week of my leave, I started therapy. Found a counsellor who specialised in workplace conflicts and ethical dilemmas. Her name was Dr. Barnes, and she had kind eyes and a direct way of speaking that I appreciated. "Tell me why you're here," she said during our first session. So I did, all of it. The fraud, the report, the divorce, the mandatory leave. Spoke for 45 minutes straight while Dr. Barnes listened without judgment. When I finished, she said, "You're carrying a lot of guilt about your role in Blake's career destruction. Yes, but you're also angry at him for putting you in that position. Yes. And you're questioning whether you did the right thing, even though by every professional standard, you did exactly what you were supposed to do. Yes." Dr. Barnes leaned back in her chair. "Here's what I'm hearing. You're struggling with the gap between what was professionally correct and what feels personally right. Those aren't always the same thing. They should be. People in my position can't let personal feelings override professional obligations. But they will. You're human. Personal feelings always factor in, whether you acknowledge them or not. The question isn't whether they influenced you, they did. The question is whether your actions would have been different if you weren't personally hurt. I thought about that. No, I would have still reported the fraud. That's my job. Then the personal feelings didn't change your actions. They just made those actions more emotionally complicated. But I wanted him to hurt. I wanted maximum consequences. Doesn't that make me vindictive? It makes you human. Catherine, someone you trusted betrayed you, mocked your life's work, tried to exploit your position. Of course you wanted him to face consequences. The fact that you also had professional obligations doesn't erase your personal feelings. So what do I do with that? How do I live with knowing I wanted to hurt him? You accept it. You acknowledge that revenge felt good in the moment, and then you decide whether that's who you want to be going forward. It's not. I don't want to be someone who uses professional authority for personal vendettas. Then don't be. Learn from this. Make different choices next time. But also forgive yourself for being human. We talked for another 30 minutes about professional ethics, personal boundaries, the complicated intersection of work and relationships. When the session ended, I felt slightly less burdened. Not absolved, not fixed, just slightly lighter. I scheduled weekly appointments with Dr. Barnes, started working through the guilt and shame and anger, started separating what I'd done right from what I regretted. The third week of my leave, I got a call from Patricia about the divorce. Final mediation session is next Thursday. If we can finalize everything, you could be officially divorced by the end of the month. That fast? You and Blake have been cooperating, there's no custody issues, assets are straightforward. No reason to drag it out. Okay, I'll be there. How are you doing? Really doing? I'm in therapy, trying to figure out who I am when I'm not married to Blake and not working at TechCore. That's healthy. Take the time you need. The divorce can wait if you're not ready. No, I want it done. I want to close this chapter and move forward. Thursday came. The final mediation session was shorter than expected. Blake and I had reached an agreement on all major issues, just needed to sign paperwork and file with the court. As we were leaving, Blake caught my arm. "Can we talk? Just for a minute?" I looked at Patricia. She nodded. Blake and I walked to the same park bench where we'd talked before, sat in silence for a moment. "I'm moving to Seattle," Blake finally said. "Got a job offer from a small firm there. They don't know about the fraud investigation. It's a fresh start. That's good." "I'm glad you're finding a way forward." "Yeah, and I wanted to say, I know I've apologized before, but I mean it. I'm sorry for all of it. The fraud, the lies, the disrespect. You deserved better. We both deserved better. We built a marriage on assumptions and ignored problems until they destroyed us." "True." He was quiet for a moment. "Do you hate me?" I considered the question honestly. "No. I'm angry at you, hurt by you, disappointed in you, but I don't hate you. You're just someone I used to love, who became someone I couldn't trust." "That's fair." He stood up. "I hope you find happiness, Catherine. Real happiness. You deserve it. You too." He walked away. I stayed on the bench, watching him disappear into the crowd. 12 years of marriage ending with a conversation on a park bench. No drama, no tears, just acknowledgement that we'd failed each other. The divorce was finalized 3 weeks later. I received the official decree in the mail, simple, bureaucratic, reducing 12 years to legal language and signatures. I was single again, unmoored, starting over at 42. The mandatory leave was halfway done. I spent the remaining month working on my self-therapy, exercise, reading, thinking. Gradually rebuilt some sense of identity separate from work and marriage. By the time I was cleared to return to TechCore, I felt different. Not healed, but stronger. More self-aware. Better equipped to separate personal feelings from professional obligations. My first day back, Caroline greeted me with coffee and a cautious smile. "Welcome back. How are you?" "Better, clearer, ready to work." "Good. We've missed you. A lot has changed." She was right. New hires, new projects, new policies I'd need to catch up on. The company had continued without me, which was both reassuring and humbling. Harold called me into his office that afternoon. "Catherine, good to see you back. How was your leave?" "Productive. I did a lot of thinking about professional boundaries and ethics. I'm ready to return with a clearer understanding of my responsibilities." "Good, because we need to talk about your role going forward." My stomach tightened. "Okay. The board voted while you were gone. They want you to stay as VP of HR, but with some modifications. You'll be taking on a new responsibility, developing training programs on ethics and conflicts of interest. Using what happened with Blake as a teaching tool." I stared at him. "You want me to teach about my own failure?" "We want you to teach about the complexities of maintaining professional ethics when personal relationships are involved. You made a mistake, you faced consequences, you learned from it. That makes you uniquely qualified to help others navigate similar situations. Won't that just remind everyone of the scandal? It will remind them that even experienced professionals can make mistakes, and that acknowledging and learning from those mistakes is how we grow." He leaned forward. "Catherine, you're one of the best HR professionals I've worked with. What happened with Blake doesn't change that. But it does give you perspective that others don't have. We want to use that." I thought about it. About turning my biggest professional failure into a teaching opportunity. About owning my mistakes publicly instead of hiding from them. "Okay," I said finally. "I'll do it. Over the next few months, I developed the training program. Used my experience with Blake as a case study, sanitized, anonymized, but recognizable to anyone who knew the details. Focused on conflict of interest policies, disclosure requirements, the importance of recusal procedures. The training was well received. People appreciated the honesty, the acknowledgement that even ethics professionals face ethical dilemmas. I also slowly rebuilt my reputation, proved I could maintain boundaries, make objective decisions, separate personal feelings from professional obligations. It wasn't easy. There were days when the guilt threatened to overwhelm me. Days when I questioned every decision, wondering if I was being objective or letting personal biases creep in. But gradually, I found my footing again. Remembered why I'd chosen this career. Reconnected with the purpose that had driven me for 20 years. 6 months after returning to work, I was reviewing applications for a new senior recruiter position. One application caught my eye. Excellent credentials, impressive track record, strong recommendations. The name on the application, Felix Warren. Blake's cousin. Someone I'd met a few times at family gatherings. My first instinct was to reject it immediately. Too close to Blake, too much potential for conflict. Then I stopped, took a breath, asked myself, what would I do if this was anyone else? I'd evaluate the application on its merits, disclose the family connection, recuse myself from the final decision if necessary. That's what professional ethics required. Not automatic rejection based on personal history, but careful evaluation following standard procedures. So I did exactly that. Disclosed the relationship to Harold, recused myself from the interview process, let the hiring team make the decision based on qualifications alone. Felix got the job. Not because of his connection to me, but despite it. Because he was genuinely qualified and the team made an objective assessment. That felt like progress. Like I'd finally learned to balance personal feelings with professional standards. Blake sent an email when he heard Felix had been hired. Heard my cousin got a job at TechCore. Thank you for not holding my mistakes against him. That took integrity. I didn't respond. But I appreciated the acknowledgement. A year after the divorce, I went on my first date. A guy named Aaron, I'd met through Angela, divorced, same age, worked in finance. We had dinner, talked about our lives, found we had a surprising amount in common. My ex-wife thought I cared more about work than our marriage, he said over dessert. She was probably right. I let career ambition consume everything else. My ex-husband thought my career was pointless, I replied, while simultaneously trying to benefit from my position. The hypocrisy was stunning. We both laughed at that. The dark humor of failed marriages. What happened? Aaron asked. If you don't mind talking about it. So I told him. Not everything, but the key points, the fraud, the report, the professional and personal consequences. That must have been incredibly difficult, he said when I finished. It was. But I learned a lot about professional ethics, about personal boundaries, about the difference between justice and revenge. And what did you learn? That sometimes they're the same thing. And that's okay, as long as you're honest about your motivations. We dated casually for several months. Nothing serious. Just companionship and someone to talk to. Eventually, it fizzled out naturally. We were better as friends than romantic partners. But it was a start, proof that I could open myself up to someone new without letting past betrayals poison future relationships. 2 years after reporting Blake, I received a LinkedIn message from him. I wanted to let you know I got promoted to senior engineer at my Seattle firm, working on a major infrastructure project. Things are going well. I've been in therapy, working through my tendency toward dishonesty. I'm not the same person I was. I hope you're well. I read it several times, feeling complicated emotions, pride that he'd turned things around, relief that he was getting help, sadness for what we'd lost. I typed back, "Congratulations on the promotion. I'm glad you're doing well and getting help. I'm doing well too." No hard feelings. That was true. The anger had faded. The hurt had healed, mostly. What remained was just history. A chapter of my life that had taught me important lessons but no longer defined me. 3 years after the divorce, TechCorp promoted me to Chief People Officer. The board cited my ethics training program, my careful navigation of complex situations, my ability to balance professional standards with human compassion. The promotion came with more responsibility, more authority, more opportunity to shape company culture. I accepted it with gratitude and a renewed commitment to doing it right, to maintaining the standards I'd nearly compromised, to being the kind of leader who upheld ethics because they mattered, not because they were convenient. The night I got the promotion, I sat on my back porch with a glass of wine, thinking about the journey. From discovering Blake's fraud, to reporting it, to facing consequences, to rebuilding my career from the ashes of my biggest mistake. It had been painful, costly, transformative, but I'd survived. More than survived, I'd grown. Become someone stronger, wiser, more self-aware, someone who understood that professional ethics weren't just rules to enforce on others. They were standards to live by, especially when it hurt. My phone buzzed. Text from Angela. "Heard about the promotion, so proud of you. Dinner to celebrate?" I typed back, "Absolutely. Tomorrow night? Perfect. Love you. Love you too." I set down my phone and looked up at the stars, thought about Blake, wherever he was, hopefully happy and healthy and honest. Thought about the woman I used to be naive, trusting, willing to overlook small deceptions because love mattered more than truth. That woman was gone. In her place was someone harder, yes, but also someone with clearer boundaries. Someone who understood that real love required honesty, that real partnership required respect, that real trust had to be earned. Someone who would never again compromise her integrity for anyone. The cost had been high. A marriage ended, a career nearly destroyed, years of guilt and shame and difficult growth. But sitting there on my porch, drinking wine under the stars, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace, not because I'd gotten revenge on Blake, not because I'd destroyed his career or proven my work wasn't pointless, but because I'd learned to value myself enough to maintain standards, because I'd chosen integrity over comfortable lies, because I'd become someone I could respect. That was worth more than any revenge could ever be. 5 years after the divorce, I stood in front of 300 people at a national HR conference, preparing to give a keynote speech about ethics in leadership. The irony wasn't lost on me. The woman who'd once weaponized professional standards was now teaching others how to maintain them with integrity. The conference center in Chicago was massive. All glass and steel and echoing voices. I'd spoken at events before, but never as the keynote. Never to an audience this large, this influential. Caroline was in the front row, having flown out to support me. She'd become my right hand over the years, eventually promoted to Director of Employee Relations. Angela sat beside her, having taken time off from her law practice to watch her sister's big moment. The moderator introduced me with a list of accomplishments that sounded impressive when strung together: Chief People Officer at a Fortune 500 tech company, architect of award-winning ethics programs, author of articles on workplace integrity that had been cited in dozens of journals. I walked to the podium feeling the weight of expectation. These people wanted answers, wanted guidance on navigating the complicated intersection of personal relationships and professional responsibilities. I could give them that because I'd lived it, failed at it, rebuilt from the wreckage. "Good morning," I began, my voice steady despite the butterflies in my stomach. "I'm going to start with a confession. 6 years ago, I violated the ethics policies I'd spent my career developing. I approved a consulting contract for my spouse without disclosing the conflict of interest. And when I discovered he'd committed fraud against my company, I reported it, but my motivations weren't purely professional. The room went silent. This wasn't the typical corporate keynote. This was raw honesty. I was angry, I continued, hurt. I'd overheard my husband mocking my career to his friends, calling my life's work pointless. And when I found evidence of his fraud, part of me, a significant part, wanted him to suffer consequences. Not just because it was the right thing to do professionally, but because I wanted him to understand exactly how much power my pointless job actually had. I paused, let that sink in. Saw people leaning forward, fully engaged. So here's my question to all of you. Does motive matter? If I upheld professional standards while simultaneously seeking personal vindication, does that make my actions less ethical? I spent the next 45 minutes walking through the case study, sanitized enough to protect privacy, but detailed enough to be useful. Talked about the conflict of interest policy I'd violated, the investigation process, the personal and professional consequences.